want to give this year with Uzecha Nishmas Avi Mori
Reuven ben Shaul.
Reuven ben Shaul.
Yes.
And the English name? Or you would
Rosh Zucker.
Rosh Zucker. Because actually I was speaking, because actually originally Jeff wanted me to come over on Shabbos. Was that the plan? But then we wanted to get 10 people to say a Kaddish, but I think it was the game plan.
Yes. But
then I said that nothing wrong with that. But I think I quoted you Rav Pam at the time that he says in terms of doing things with ve-chatima Nishmas. What are even though I have a question on it about this, but this is what I heard it quoted in his name, so I didn't hear it directly from him. But he used to say when he was, I guess he was brought up in Europe, it wouldn't be a surprise. Rav Pam is the one who passed away already. He was the Rosh HaShana in Torah Vadas in Brooklyn.
His son's, I think, a Rabbi.
His son is a Rav Pam as well in Toronto. So he says that when he was learning in yeshiva in Europe, I forget where. So when there was and if his mother caught like a camel driver, horse driver, just going over to his town, so if she was, if it was a last minute thing, he'd just say, "Send regards, say hello to my son." If she had a little more time, she would send a letter, and if she really had more time, she'd send a kugel. So what's the nimshul? So he says, Kaddish, that's like sending regards. When you say Kaddish, it's like saying hello. When you learn on behalf of your father or whoever it is, your loved one, that's like writing a letter. By giving charity to a Torah institution, supporting Torah, he said that's like sending a kugel. So my kasha is that, so maybe my kasha was, is that better than learning for your father? So maybe I thought maybe meant because you're getting both, and maybe learning for your father and giving a donation to a Torah institution. So that's like a kugel. That's why I was commenting, because you was focusing on the Kaddish. And I'm saying why stop? You might as well shoot for the kugel or cholent or whatever you want to put in. So let's discuss in Yani ELUL. So we know the minhag Ashkenaz is we started saying L'David Hashem Ori. In the month of ELUL, we started adding to our davening L'David Hashem Ori, as well as we started to blow the shofar every morning. There are different minhagim. There's one minhag I heard that they did it only on Rosh Chodesh ELUL, but that's not our practice. I'm not sure if some still have that. Our practice is to do it every day in ELUL, except for Erev Rosh HaShana. And that's why, because we want to show a distinction between ELUL, which is a pure custom. It's just to wake us up, to get ready, to prepare us that the day is coming, Rosh Hashanah is coming, with the actual biblical mitzvah which we fulfill on Rosh Hashanah. So to separate what they call a tekiah derishus and a tekiah dechova, to separate an optional blowing of the shofar, which is ELUL, with a mandatory biblical one, so we stop at Erev Rosh Hashanah and we continue on Rosh Hashanah. And in fact, speaking of ELUL, actually, it fits into this week's parasha as well, Parashas Kitzetzeh, not in a place you'd actually think you'd find ELUL, but in the beginning of the parasha, talks about Eshesh Yefas Toar, the concept of when talking about the people fighting during a war. And then we know wartime in general, morale is down, and so the fighting war, and the soldiers see a beautiful woman and they want to take her as a wife. So albeit the Torah does not condone that behavior, but nevertheless it tries to do things to make sure you'll change, but ultimately it gives you a plan of attack how to do it. But first they tell you can't do it for 30 days, she has to grow her hair longer, her nails, etc. She has to sit alone, crying over her father or mother, etc. And it says she does it for a month, I think Yerech Yamim. So we know that different words used But first of all, what is Yerach Yamimim? So the Zohar says on this pasuk, Zuhi Chodesh Elul. This is referring to the month of Elul. And the question is, what does Yefas Toar have to do with Elul? Like, they could be fighting a war any time of the year. It's not limited to wars during the month of Elul. So what exactly is the relationship to Elul? And secondly, in fact, it says that she's crying over, what does it mean she's crying over a mother and father? So the different opinions in terms of that she's no longer going to be, she's actually crying over her real mother or father, or that now that it's referring to Avodah Zarah now, where she won't be worshipping Avodah Zarah anymore. In fact, there's a discussion, we have a principle in the Gemara, a ger shenolad kekatan shenolad dami, that someone who converts to Judaism, a Jew by choice, is considered like a newborn baby. So there's different questions. Where's the source of this halacha from? And that's a separate share. But some quote this pasuk that's why she's crying now. That should be a katan shenola dami, and that will be the end of it. She's going to be starting all fresh and new.
I said, crying for her mother and father. By this interpretation, the mother and father mean the Avodah Zarah.
Right, right. One actually means it's an allusion to her Avodah Zarah. Others say it means literally that she's going to be, it's like she's doing, it's kind of like a shloshim, like an avelis type thing, right? So what the Torah writes is lo dibra Torah elo keneged yetzahara. The Torah doesn't condone this behavior, but we see, however, it's writing against one's evil inclination. Certain times we see, since God created us, He knows our potential, what we can control, what we can. And therefore, under these special circumstances, the Torah recognizes a special dispensation. For some people, maybe it's on the golf course, they get the special dispensation, but the Torah is talking about when you're fighting in a war, and etc. That was the common practice. I guess people used to rape women and all those type of things that go on in war. So the Torah realized what's going on. We're not condoning any of that, but in terms of under the right parameters, once you're going to do it, this is the way you have to do it. So the Dibra Torah el keneged yetzara. In other words, so the Bali Musa point out that before the Bali Musa point out, there's another place where they bring up this concept of they compare it to Yefas Torah according to some. There's a concept of kadele de chazeri, eating bacon in the land of Israel. There was a whole shiur on it on Kosher Tube. You could check it out. But what the Gemara talks about in Chulin and Nav Yud Zayin is when the Jewish people were about to enter the land of Israel. So in the Midbar, they were able to eat certain types of meat. Like not any meat. They had to go through a certain process. Whatever, basa nechira, but wasn't shchita the way we know it today with the butcher boys. So basically, that when they entered the land of Israel, the laws of shchita, of slaughtering the way we know it, started to apply. So the question the Gemara wanted to know is, what about the leftover meat they had in the desert? They can't, any new animal you're going to slaughter, you have to do it with the proper codes of slaughtering. But what about the leftover meat that when they slaughtered already, that was kosher at the time, and now they're entering the land of Israel, could they eat that meat at night? That's the Gemara's question.
Oh, it's a kasha altogether.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, sorry, there's leftovers from, if I have a leftover chicken, I can have it the next day.
No, the question is because there was kosher in the midbar. No,
yes, sorry.
No, the question is like this. It's not the question like that. Obviously, if you left over chicken today, you can have, even though no one eats leftovers today, it's a separate issue. But yes, you can eat leftover chicken. That's not the question. Here is, in the midbar, if you were staying in the midbar, it wouldn't be a question. The point being is, when they entered the land of Israel, new laws applied. So therefore, if they would have slaughtered it the way they did in the midbar, it wouldn't be kosher now. So that's the question.
You mean the laws of shchita were more lax
in the midbar, correct. And now these new laws started applying when they entered the land of Israel. So now, so the point being, if you sorted it now, it wouldn't be kosher. The question is, but when you did it, it was kosher. Do we apply the grandfather clause?
Okay.
That's the question. So the Gemara first says, like, when are we talking about? There were 14 years the Jews were in Israel. The first 7 years they were fighting, and the last 7 years they were dividing the land. So which, what are we talking about? When did this question come up? So at first the Gemara says perhaps that it can't be talking about the first 7 years, because we all know when the Jews, when they're fighting, not only they're allowed to eat kadre de chazeri, they can eat bacon, go into the guy's home, and they can eat the food, whatever was in the pots they could eat. That's part of Machamas Mitzvah. We'll see. It was maybe limited to Eretz Yisrael, but we'll see. But they were able to have a special dispensation of kadri de chazeri.
Because of Pikuach Nefesh?
Yeah, well, actually, that'll be I'm going to get to that point in a second. That's going to be the Machlokas Ramban. So they said, so obviously if you could eat treif, then certainly you could eat leftover chicken. Come on. It must have been the other 7 years. I don't know how they kept it for 7 years, but the Gemara says, no, even me talking about the first 7 years, because the Gemara says you only can take food from the Goyim. You can't go ahead and cook your own bacon. Okay. You only go stuff, but to Malayim called Tuv, you only can take from them. So therefore, the Gemara goes back, so it could be either, so the Gemara leaves it a question. In fact, there was a soldier, a character in one of the Israeli wars, and he used to say, oh, kadri de chazeri, let's go ahead and we could barbecue treif. Of course, that wasn't halal. It's only if you find it, and whether it applies today or not is a separate question, but he wasn't, I don't think it was serious anyway. So the point being is, so we see they're able to eat bacon. So the question, what do you mean, like, what was this? So it's a machlokas, the Rambam and the Ramban, what kind of dispensation was. So some say, even if you had other food, even if you weren't hungry, you could still do it. And others say no, it was more kind of like your fast toar. Obviously, if pikuach nefesh, of course, you're allowed to, I wouldn't need a special pasuk. You're allowed to eat non-kosher to save your life. But let's say you didn't have to save your life, but let's say you didn't have any food and you were hungry, you weren't going to die, but let's say it was uncomfortable, so some, according to some Rishonim, this is equated to the law of your fast toar. But that itself is a point of contention, whether it was no holds barred during those 14 years, or it was only if you're really hungry, you didn't have other food. But clear by your fast Torah, the halacha was, even though it wasn't nothing that we condone per se, but it was a special dispensation. And that's what, and the Bali Musa pointed out, we see that you make a special dispensation in this case, but that means all the other cases, the rest of the Torah you can keep. Because one of the big obstacles in keeping the Torah is people think it's too much, it's not for me. In fact, Rav Soloveitchik was fond of saying the Rambam has the 13 Ikarim, the 13 tenets of faith. So they point out, he says, if I was around during the Rambam, I would have added a 14th one. The 14th one was that the Torah applies in all generations, anytime, whether it's the internet age, technology, 21st century, the Torah applies for all ages. That's what he would have put down. One of the big obstacles, and that's why we have many kiruv groups, is people think it's too hard, it's too much. How can I keep all these different laws? And that's so that's what your fast Torah tells us, that something that's too much, God will tell us it's too much. But everything else, what they're telling us we can do, and even though that's separate here, even though that's people quote that every nisayon you get, every test you get, you can withstand. That's not so simple that it's true. Rav Tzadok HaKohen, that's the standard. Rav Tzadok HaKohen doesn't go for that. He says it's not necessarily true. Obviously, we have to view every test as we could do it. But after the fact doesn't mean there could have been certain things we can't do. Doesn't mean because you stumbled on something, it could have been you didn't have free choice. As it could be that when you have, it could be, whether I like a jelly donut or a chocolate donut, that might not be free choice. That might be how I was brought up, but other things, but in terms of not the fact the person sins doesn't mean he could have withstood that. That's, even though that's the standard saying, but Rav Tzadok HaKohen disagrees and says, again, practically speaking, we have to view that we can. You can't, because then you can say, okay, this isn't one I couldn't do. That's, as I like to say, we have two doctors. Judaism has two, the Rambam and the Ramban, Maimonides and Nachmanides. But people usually confuse the two. The Rambam is the doctor before. Right now when you're sick and there's something you could do about it, he's into the do's and don'ts. Preventive medicine, take your medication, whatever it is, when you can do something about it. So the Rambam is very pragmatic. The Ramban is much more emunah based and mystical. So yeah, you're right. So when the doctors can't do anything, then you can turn to the Ramban. Unfortunately, people confuse the two. Before they could be, well, they can do something. Oh, well, it's basher. If that's the way it's supposed to. And afterwards, well, what could I, what could I do? The point is, you got to take the right doctor at the right time. But there's a famous story with Rabbi Salanter. He once came to a town, and there's a very poor person, and so we got a big problem because halacha, you can't take the bread or the food if someone doesn't have any more food. So, but he didn't want to embarrass the person, so he could not come to his house and make him feel even worse. So he came to his house, they sat down, and then when he gave out the food, so Rabbi Selevan didn't take. He said, "Why come you're not having food?" He said, "My doctor said I can't eat this." Okay, well, my doctor said, well, no one's going to argue with the doctor. Okay, then afterwards, when they left, one of the students built up the courage to ask, "But Rabbi, you're the big Muslim movement, like, what do you mean, your doctor? How are you able to lie to this guy?" He said, "What do you mean lie? My doctor's the Rambam, and the Rambam paskins it's usher to take the food from the last person, the last piece. So therefore, so that's the two doctors. So like in many things in life, when you could do something about it, then you should, and then then afterwards, when there's no one else, then then you could go. Then you go on the other question.
Yeah. Listen, do you see a connection between the idea that Ashes Torah is there, so as a make, so to speak, a concession to human frailty, and then the Torah just wants to circumscribe it and minimize it and so on and regularize it and regulate it, I say. And the idea, and the Rambam's idea of korban, the idea of korban is also, so to say, a concession to our desire for avodah zarah. Of course it's controversial, but do you see a connection there between these two ideas?
Yeah, it's similar. You're so right. Jeff is referring to, there's a major dispute, the Rambam and the Ramban, on the purpose of karbanos.
Yes.
So the Rambam has an opinion, in the Nevuchim, other places, that it's basically to wean us away from idol worship. But since that's the way the Goyim are doing it this way, so they asked us to go cold turkey, that's too much. So therefore, he said, no, keep the same korban, but redirect it to Hashem. And the Ramban disagrees. He says, what are you talking about? We had karbanos well before Avodah Zarah even began. We have Adam and Noach, etc. So he says korban for the word karev, to come close to, reach, so that's a separate share. But yeah, so Jeff is suggesting, and it's similar, that the Rambam's concept here, even though obviously the Torah, the differences here, right? You could give another reason why the karban, but based on the Rambam's reason, is also similar. Is too much to ask us just to get rid of avodah zarah completely. So therefore, redirect it to God. So here it's a special dispensation. So to here, it's a special dispensation because we're in wartime. And therefore morale is down already, so therefore we don't want you to do it, but if you're going to do it under these guidelines, you want to have some control over the matter.
So again, you could say, to wean away, for the Ashes Torah, there's like a 30-day cooling off period.
No, that's what that's the goal, is after 30 days, because it's ve-chatima, it's a desire, it's infatuation. So that usually, if you see her sitting there ugly, sitting in the corner, she whatever, whatever maybe what we consider ugly today is different than them, but whatever they did things that today people have long nails, it's a nice thing. I don't know, so I'm just saying, so therefore whatever, it's not the details of what it is, but she's supposed to make herself look, or the Torah wants to make her look unattractive. So the point being is, after 30 days you'd come around, and therefore you wouldn't do it. That was many things we did to prevent it, but ultimately if you're going to do it, this is the way you have to do it. And then, I don't have the percentage, but I assume most of the time the person didn't do it. In fact, we have because Chazal tell us also there's a psychological concept here of pas bisalo, which means is that basically forbidden waters are sweeter. Something you can't, a lot of times something you can't do, the fact you can't do it makes it more enticing. So therefore, to make it less enticing, if the Torah permits it in a certain way, okay, so it's no big deal anymore. That type of thing, in terms of that's human nature. No one's going to tell me what to do, and therefore, that's why we have reverse psychology by kids. You tell them the opposite, and then, of course, the trick is at what point do you stop doing that, because it's a mitzvah of chinuch that you have to teach them to listen to your parents, not to listen.
Yeah.
That's a separate chinuch shir.
Pass the Selevan's bread in the
Yeah, you satisfy.
Pass means bread in the basket.
Yeah, I mean, basically you have it like this. But I understand the concept, because a lot of times a person, let's say they have a cravings for chocolate. I'll make up the food, chocolate, pistachio, whatever it doesn't make a difference. Is if they have it at 5-pound bag in the closet, they don't have to have it. But if they didn't have it in the house, they just go crazy. So the fact you can have it takes away somewhat, that type of concept. Pas betzalo, you don't have to have them. So they point out that so that's the concept over here of Yerech Yomim Zu Chodesh Elul. The whole purpose of Chodesh Elul is contemplation, time of introspection, the shofar. And in fact, I think the Meshach Chachma, others point out the two words the Torah uses when it talks about month. It uses Chodesh, as we all know, and it uses Yerech. Yerech also means month, that they use here. And we find...
Any connection with Yareach?
Moon, yeah. So, exactly, yeah. So, very good, yeah. So they point out that, so by a ksuva, what does it say, Yerech or Chodesh? I just read a ksuva recently, so...
That's good.
At my nephew's wedding. Of course, they didn't... My nephew.
When was that?
About a Memorial Day weekend, so I guess it was a couple. Of course, they didn't tell me until right before about reading the ksuva. So it says Chodesh in there, but in a get, it says Yerech.
Oh, interesting.
So what's why Chodesh by a ksuva and why Yerech by a get? So again, there are many different explanations, but one is along these lines. Because a ksuva, you're getting married. Chodesh, chiddush, new. You're starting new. You're starting a new life now, and you're looking to the positive, to the future. Yerech is basically it's the end of a union. Like a get, this is it. It's the end of a time. Hopefully you'll work it out with the next one, if there will be a next one. But Yerech is like the Yerech Yom here also with the Yifas Tolar. It's a whole new beginning. She becomes a convert, a ger. So therefore she have to take, time of contemplation to take your past and turn it into it. But those are the different lashon. Chodesh, new, marriage, ksuva, chiddush, you're starting fresh, the freshness of a new marriage. And then you have, in contrast to get, where you have Yerech, it's the end. So Elul also, the whole month, yeah.
The first Torah says Yerech?
Yeah.
How could she's costing?
Yeah, those 30, and that's why Elul, those 30 days is Yerech Yomim to prepare us for Rosh HaShana. You're supposed to take introspection and work. How could I have better Shalom Bayis? How could I do more Chesed? How could I learn more? How could I'm a person. You can fill in the blanks, and that's you have the whole month of Elul. It's a time of introspection and contemplation, and that's the connection between Yifas Tolar and Elul. It doesn't do with fighting the war, but it's the concept. The woman, those 30 days, she is sitting there contemplating because she's starting a new life now. She's becoming a Jew, and it's going to be a whole new beginning And so to Elul, we're all Yom Hadin, we're all being judged. On Chayim Amavis, on Rosh HaShana, we have the month of Elul to try to get our act together. In fact, I pointed out, and that's why it's interesting, they also point out that later on in this parsha, it talks about the Ben Sorer Umoreh, the rebellious child. And of course we still have rebellious children today. Some, they still exist, but not the Ben Sorer Umoreh that the Torah is talking about. The Gemara in the 8th parak of Sanhedrin has a whole parak, whole chapter on it, and it gives us many details which are very so improbable, which leads one of the rabbis to conclude it never happened, it never will happen, it's impossible. We're talking about a hypothetical. It's just to teach us a lesson, drush v'kabel schar. It's impossible to have all these little intricate details of what you require. So again, so what's the lesson of Ben Sorer Umoreh? I'll get to it in a second. But the question is, what's the juxtaposition between Yefas Toar and Ben Sorer Umoreh? So, right?
Why should there be? I'm sorry.
Why should there be?
Yes, I didn't get the Havanina. You said, what's the connection?
No, because the Torah puts it together.
Oh, in the same parsha, sorry.
Yeah, right next to, I mean, there's something in between, but it's close enough.
Of course, okay.
What's the juxtaposition? I'm not sure if it's Rashi quotes the Chazal. The Chazal tell us to teach us that, so that's the end result, that if you take, we don't condone it's a special dispensation, but if you do take a Yefas Toar, the end result will be you're going to have a Ben Sorer Umoreh as a child. So the question is, like, okay, don't do me any favors, don't give me any dispensation, just tell me it's Asa then. It's okay, but you know what? It's okay to put your head in the fire, but if you do, you're going to burn your head off. Okay, thank you. So just say that I can't do it. Like, what do you mean you can do it? So what's the pledge? Oh, it's like, can I do it or can't I do it? So the Mefarshim point out, the commentators point out that it's not an onus, it's not a punishment. It's just a natural consequence. Because what's the explanation? Because what's it going to be? What are your kids going to see? Why did you take this woman? You don't know the first thing about her. She doesn't necessarily have good midos, good characteristics, chesed. All you know is you were infatuated with her. So we see all the externals are important to you. If the kids see what's important to you is the externals only, externals are important, but not only externals, and that's the only thing, you don't care about so the kid's going to end up saying that's the type of chinuch you're going to give your kid, and he's, so to speak, going to end up, it's not a punishment, it's just saying that's what's going to be. Of course a person's here, he can do tshuva and do Yefas Toar and have a good kid. It's not telling me it has to happen, but it's a natural consequence. If that's the way you bring up children, if the physical things are important, then they're going to want these things. If you teach them certain values, so that's going to be, so that's in terms of how, of course, as always, you need mazel when you bring up kids. There's only a certain amount parents could do, but there's a lot parents could do. But I'm saying, ultimately, you could do everything and it still might not turn out, but it isn't necessarily your fault. Other times, if parents don't do anything, they don't try, then they do play a role. Ultimately, everyone has to take responsibility for their own decisions, but obviously, parents do play some role in terms of how your child, sometimes in spite of you, the kid could turn out very well, and sometimes in spite of how good you are, the kid might not. So, but that's a separate there. So Ben Sorer Umoreh, it's not a punishment, it's a natural consequence. And then interesting to note, the Ben Sorer Umoreh, why, if it never happened, so what's the lesson of Ben Sorer Umoreh? Like, according to the opinion, it never will happen, never did happen, so what's it all about? So they point out that actually there's a beautiful Ramban on this week's Parsha. He brings down, because what happens to a Ben Sorer? He's put to death. I think Chol Ha'am Yishmu V'Yiru in front of everyone. He says it doesn't seem proportional here, because a kid, because he's going on drugs or he's going to be a bank robber, it doesn't seem that what he's doing, it says that what he did, it's bad, but not so bad like that he's not like an idol worshiper, why should he be put to death for it? In fact, the Mishnah tells us, Nidon al Shem Sofo. In fact, he's not killed for what he did, he's killed al Shem Sofo, for what's going to be at the end. So the Ramban points out, this is one of the few cases in the Torah, usually you get Misa for an onish you did. For some, Ben Tzora more is an exception to the rule. It's not what you did, it's more on, it's what you're going, in terms of, it's the concept behind that you're putting, that the concept where it's going to lead to, in terms of that it's you're destroying, you know, the parental system and the system, and that way you're doing things which is causing a breakdown in society. So it's not the act per se you're doing, but it's what you're causing in this. Like for instance, Ramban gives another example of last week's parsha, a zakein mamre. A zakein mamre, someone who rebels against the Sanhedrin, paskins against them, is liable to the death penalty. And of course, let me point out, it doesn't mean just anyone who disagrees. As we know, we live in a society, you know, talk radio is very popular. So everyone has an opinion. It's okay to have an opinion, but not all opinions are equal. Just like if someone wanted to give an opinion on Shakespeare or Hamlet or whatever, oh, so you have a PhD, you've been studying it for 25... Oh no, I just read an article in the paper and I think this is the shot. They'd laugh you off. You didn't even earn a right to have an opinion. So people realize that when it comes to Shakespeare, when it comes to the Chumash, to the Bible, people don't get it. People think everyone has an opinion. It's okay to have an opinion, but if you just opened up and you spent about 30 seconds thinking about something, and the great rabbis had spent 40, 50 years studying it, so obviously what you say and they say obviously aren't going to be equal. So the point being is, if some person just gets up and says something against the Beis Haggadah, we don't kill that person, we laugh at him, it's a joke. He doesn't even have an opinion. It's someone, that's the advantage of not knowing anything, you won't be put to death. But someone who's a Gialo Ra, someone who's sitting on the Beis Din, and he's L'Shem Shamayim, he thinks they're wrong. I don't care what you say, this is the way, but we have to put him to death because he's breaking up the fabric of society. We can't have a system where everyone does whatever they want. Today's different, because we're in Golos, that's part of it. We don't have a Sanhedrin Haggadah, maybe it's the opposite. Today, you should be, you know, if you're a Talmud Chacham, you have a right to give your own opinions on different things. You don't necessarily have to follow a consensus, but when you have a Beis Din Haggadah, and that's the central body, you're undermining the fabric of the Beis Din Haggadah. So the Ramban, that's another example of when you're not killed because of what you did, you have good intentions. But it's what you're undermining, that's the saying in the Ben Tzora Morer, and I think he has two other examples the Ramban gives also. Eidim Zomim, a very strange halacha where two people testify about that they testify this person did something and they were going to kill them, and then two other witnesses say, I have no idea if it's true, but I know you're lying because you were with me in Chicago at the time. So how could you have testified in Baltimore? And it's a strange halacha. If you get them before the die, if you catch them to be zomim and before they kill the guy, they get punished. But if the person's already dead, that's it. It's a special xeris akasa. We don't have the kasha zomim. But the point being is, the Ramban says another example where they're undermining the judicial system. We're not doing the punishment isn't on what they did. It's on that. And there's one more example he gives of a mesa, someone who tries to get someone to worship Avodah Zarah. If he did get it, that's not the person. But you try to get against someone, 4 examples the Ramban gives where the whole Yishmu v'Yuru, because you're not getting punished for the specific act, which you usually do, but you're getting punished on undermining the whole system. And sometimes undermining the whole system is worse than the actual act. And that's what we learned from the Ramban in this week's parsha, Ben Tzora Morer, and that's the concept here, Ben Tzora Morer, Yefas Toar, Zu Chodesh Elul. You fight a war anytime, but Elul is a time of contemplation, and that's what the difference between Chodesh and Yerach, and Ksuv and a Get, and this is our special time period Elul now, to prepare ourselves and get ready for Rosh HaShana, which is quickly approaching.